Hello, all of my amazing students. This is Mrs. A, and we're starting 1.1 in our textbook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work every 10th problem in the text so that you can get a good idea of how to do each type of problem. I'm in my very messy kitchen just trying to get you some information before we have a test coming up very, very shortly. So I'm trying to get these out so they're not going to be very glitzy, but hopefully they'll serve the purpose for which they are intended. And I will chat with you with problem number 10 shortly. Okay, so here we are with problem number 10. And I've written it on my board. And on this one, we're supposed to see if these points, either one or both, will solve this line. Okay, so I'm going to try this one first. So I'm going to plug in 1/2 for the x, and I'm going to plug in 8 for the y. Okay, and then I'm going to calculate to see if this is a true statement. So when I do -4 times 1/2, I get -2 plus 10, and a -2 plus 10 is a positive 8. So this one is a yes. Okay, so this one is a yes point. It makes this equation true. So now I'm going to erase that, and I'm going to check the second point into the equation. So I'm going to put a -1 here for the x, and then a 6 here for the y, and then I'm going to calculate that. So I'm going to get -4 times -1 is +4, plus 10 is 14, not 6. So this one is a no-go. So this one is no, it is not a solution to the line. Okay, so number 2 here, number 20, the second one we're going to do is we're given a line, 3x plus y is 6, and we're to find the x and y intercepts and then graph the line. Okay, so if I plug in a 0, remember if I'm trying to find the x-intercept, I let y be 0. Okay, so to find the x-intercept, I let y equal 0. So if I let the y be 0 and I cover that up, then I've got 3x equals 6, and then x would end up being 2. Okay, so now to write that as a point, it would be 2, 0. Now when you're doing this on a test, I would like you to say x-intercept 2, 0. Because I need to know if you know which one is the x-intercept and which one is the y-intercept. So now when we're looking for y-intercept, we're going to let x equal 0. And then when I plug that in, it's going to cover up this one. I'm going to cover up this one, and y is 6. So that point is 0, 6. Because the x goes in the x place and the y goes in the y place. So I found my x and y intercepts here. So now to graph, okay, my 2, 0 is right here. And my 0, 6 is 6 steps up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm running up into my words here. Okay, and remember 2 points makes a line, but 3 points checks a line. If we plug in a 1 here, let's just plug in a 1 for a third point, then we're going to get 3 plus something is 6, and then y would be 3 also. So 1, 3 should be a third point on the graph, and we will end up putting 1, 3, right, 1, 1, 2, 3 right there. And so the 3 points makes a line. Let's see if I can graph it. Oh, that's squiggly. But that is how you would graph that line. Now, when you're graphing a line on the test, I want to see your point sitting here, or you can put your points in an XY grid. A lot of times I'll ask you to put your points in an XY grid just to make them easier for me to grade. So you would put 2, 0, 0, 6, and 1, 3 down as your 3 points. And this point, of course, could vary. You could have put -3, and then that would have been a 9. So negative 1, 9 would have been a point, because negative 1 would make that negative 3, and then I'd have to add 9 to get to 6. So that would have been another possibility there. So I will be back shortly with problem number 30. Okay, so this is problem number 30 under 1.1 in your textbook. And it is a line, y is equal to 2 minus 4/3 x, and we're going to graph it. Notice that we should take note that our x, which is usually in the front, is not in the back. So this is our slope, and this positive 2 is our y-intercept. We're used to seeing it flipped around. So we're going to graph by y-intercept and slope. So we're going to plug in 0, 2, because that's our y-intercept. And then we're going to go down 4, right 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Because we have one negative, okay? Or we could go up 4, back 3. So I could put the negative on the top or the negative on the bottom. So up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, back 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so then always remember to draw your line that goes through your points. And that is number 30. Okay, so here we are with number 40. Y is x squared plus 2x minus 1, and we are to graph this equation. Okay, so we already have it solved for y, and if we were using a graphing calculator, that's the way we should do it. But on this part of the test, you will have to do one without the graphing calculator and then one with the graphing calculator. So this is the one without the graphing calculator. So what I'm going to do is make my little XY grid. Okay, and this is always going to be easiest to find what happens when x is 0. When x is 0, I get my y-intercept. So let's let that be our first point. When x is 0, this one goes out and this one goes out, and I'm left with y is negative 1. So when x is 0, y is negative 1. So there's 1 point. So now we're going to plug in x is 1. So if I plug in x is 1, x squared is a 1. Okay, plus a twice 1, 2 times 1 is a 2, and then a negative 1, so I end up with a 1 and a negative 1. Those cancel out, so I get when x is 1, y is 2. When x is 2, then I'm going to get a 4. And then plus another 4 when I plug in my x is 2, minus a 1, and that's going to be 8 take away 1 is 7. So when I plug in a 2, I get out a 7. All right, so now this is starting to go up. Let's plug in something on the left. Let's plug in a negative 1, because remember, 3 points is okay for a line, but I need 5 points for a parabola, and this is a parabola. Quadratic. So I'm going to plug in a negative 1. When I plug in a negative 1, that becomes a positive 1. That becomes a negative 2. And that becomes a negative 1. Stays a negative 1. And so I get 1, take away 2 is a negative 1, and another negative 1 is a negative 2. So I get a negative 2 here. Okay? And then I'm going to plug in a negative 2 and see what happens. If I plug in a negative 2, this becomes a 4. And this becomes a minus 4. And then that becomes a negative 1. So I end up with a negative 1 altogether. All right, so let's see what it looks like and see if we need more points. Okay, because we don't have, well, we have a repeat right here. Okay, we have a negative 1 and a negative 1. Let's see what this looks like. Now, as we're going into this, we should know generally what this looks like. All x squared equations are horseshoes, aren't they? So this is a parabola shaped like a horseshoe, and when the x squared is positive, that means my horseshoe is facing upward. Okay, so it's a smiley face. So we know the general shape. So 0, negative 1 would go right there. And 1 up 2, we'll put that right there. And 2 up 7, of course, graph paper would be nice, but I don't have graph paper. That was a 2, 4, we'll make that a 7 because I'm out of room. Okay, -1 and -2. And a -2 and a -1. So we're seeing our vertex here, and we're seeing our point. So if I went one more, I should go up to a 7 again. So let's do that. Let's plug in -3. And when we plug in a -3, we're going to get a 9. Okay, and then we're going to get a -6. So 9 minus 6 is 3. Okay, and then I get a -1. So I get the, oh, it was supposed to go up to 2. I skipped to 7. It should have been a 2 anyway, and it comes out of 2. Okay, I just forgot a point there. So then we're going to go up to 2, which is what you get when you plug in a -3. 9 take away 6 is 3, take away 1 more is 2. Okay, so -3, 2 is a point, and it's balancing out. So the next one should be a 7, right? If we plugged in a -4, it should go to a 7. Let's just check it out. -4 makes that a 16. Take away an 8 is an 8. Take away 1 more is 7. And that's what we expected, because we're mirroring these points over here on this side. We're mirroring the y's. So it went -1 to 7 before. So once we get the -1, it should go -1 to 7 again on the other side. And there you have it. Uh-oh, this video turned out to be so long that I could not make it one video, so I made it 2 videos. So check on your YouTube for a second video for 1.1 because this one was just too long. I will eventually put all of these in one playlist, all of Chapter 1's videos together, so they should all be together eventually. But look for part 2.